I am the ninth son of the emperor, destined to have no connection to the throne due to my unusual eyes. My father arranged a marriage between me and Su ManMan, the daughter of the prime minister, as a means to control the prime minister's power and also as a humiliation. Su ManMan had always been free to come and go from the palace and had good relationships with all the princes, except for me, whom she treated coldly. I knew that Su ManMan was like the moon in the sky, while I was the mud on the ground. So I devised a plan to break off the engagement with her. Unexpectedly, that aloof goddess's eyes turned red, but by then, I already had my own moon. Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. I am the ninth son of the emperor, born with eyes of different colors. The national advisor once predicted that a person with unusual eyes would bring misfortune to the country. My father originally intended to strangle me as soon as I was born. It was my maternal grandfather, the then Prime Minister Lin, who exchanged his power to save my life. Afterward, my grandfather retired with his entire family. My mother lost her influence and became someone everyone in the vast harem could bully. When I was 14, my mother was already so frail and beyond medical help due to her long-standing depression. It was also then that I first met my father. He was exactly as I imagined, noble, authoritative, but cold to the bone. He did not care about my mother but instead brought me to the court. He arranged a marriage between me and Su ManMan, the daughter of the prime minister who succeeded my grandfather. Junimo is my ninth prince, with excellent looks and demeanor, perfectly matching Minister Su's daughter, said my father. I still remember my father's hearty laughter at that time and the instant defeat on Minister Su's face. Everyone knew I was an ominous person with unusual eyes. My maternal family had fallen from power, and I was the most down and out among the princes, even less than a son of a common noble family. Meanwhile, Su ManMan, the daughter of Minister Su, was the only legitimate child of his wife, showered with love and honor from an early age. Though she was only 13, there were already rumors in the capital that whoever marries Su ManMan will gain the world. It was obvious that these rumors were the handiwork of Minister Su. Su ManMan was being groomed as the future empress. After that, perhaps to keep up appearances, my father began to let me study with the other princes in the imperial study, and would occasionally show concern for my studies and even my mother's illness. My mother, this unfortunate woman, received the concern, whether genuine or fake, of the man she loved in the last stretch of her life. You think you're worthy of being engaged to ManMan? I shifted my gaze from the book to the speaker, Crown Prince Tang Hiyu. Everyone in the palace knew that Tang Hiyu liked Su ManMan. Although Su ManMan's own thoughts were unknown, Minister Su was very supportive of their association. After all, if nothing unexpected happened, Tang Hiyu would be the future emperor. It is the emperor's decree, and I dare not disobey, I said with a slight smile, uttering this lukewarm statement. It immediately silenced Tang Hiyu. Even the little eunuchs in the palace knew that Tang Hiyu feared the emperor the most. Sure enough, he said no more, just threw the ink-soaked brush heavily onto my book and left. I looked at the page, now unreadable due to the ink stain, and sighed. Fortunately, I had just memorized that page. Afterward, the princes, led by Tang Hiyu, constantly targeted me. It wasn't just because of Tang Hiyu's status, but also because Su ManMan was the moonlight in the hearts of all the princes. Besides the crown prince, the 3rd, 5th, 6th, and 8th princes all had feelings for Su ManMan. Even the 12th prince, who had just learned to walk, would follow Su ManMan around calling her sister. Certainly, there were also concubines behind the scenes encouraging this. Under such influence, Su ManMan became a goddess, the white moonlight of the entire palace. I was quite puzzled by this. Even if Minister Su's lineage could become the strongest support in the struggle for the throne, would it really lead the princes to compete to this extent? Since my father arranged the engagement with Su ManMan, it had been more than a month, and I had never even seen her. I only heard rumors about how she was as cold as the moon, understanding, with unparalleled beauty and grace. I didn't know how good she was, but I did become the target of all because of her. Losing textbooks, losing homework, and losing school supplies became common occurrences. Crown Prince Tang Hiyu would often, after crafting a brilliant upper line during class, deliberately guide the tutor to have me complete the lower line. At first, I was embarrassed. Tang Hiyu at 15 had already studied for 8 years, while I had just begun, although my mother occasionally taught me before. But it was not comparable to professional instruction. So, I burned the midnight oil every day. Finally, my couplets and essays earned applause from the entire class. The tutor even praised me, saying I was like Emperor Yu in his youth. Emperor Yu was my father. I heard that day after class, Tang Hiyu threw a huge tantrum and smashed everything he could in the Empress's palace. Since then, Tang Hiyu's targeting of me became even more severe. In horsemanship and archery classes, Tang Hiyu would conspire with the other princes to trip me up. Thus, I was forced to grow. From a weak body with no strength to bind a chicken, I developed a lean and muscular physique. My swordsmanship and riding skills also began to improve by leaps and bounds. During the hunting tournament, I won first place with a completely snow-white deer. I earned the divine bow that my father used during his campaigns in the northern borders. For a moment, I was truly in the spotlight. The courtiers all said I had the demeanor of my father in his youth. It seemed everyone forgot about my heterochromatic eyes, forgot that I was considered an ill omen except for myself. During this time, I also got to meet the beloved of many princes, my fiancée Su ManMan, the legitimate daughter of Prime Minister Su. Prime Minister Su seemed to start considering me a good choice, using the excuse of visiting consort Su to frequently send Su ManMan into the palace. The day I met Su ManMan, the sky was a watery blue. Tang Hiyu made a risky move and tampered with my horse during the equestrian lesson. As soon as I mounted, I sensed something was wrong. But it was too late. The horse beneath me began to panic and threw me off like a mad creature. All the princes and their servants were either shocked or secretly gloating. No one came forward for a moment, leaving the wild horse to trample and break my leg. It was Su ManMan who passed by the stables and saw what happened, quickly calling the palace servants to lead the wild horse away. "Does it hurt a lot?" This was the first thing Su ManMan said to me, gentle as water. The Su family's daughter is indeed as bright as the moon in the sky. This was the only thought in my mind before I fainted. But would this moon really shine on someone like me, considered an ill omen? After my leg was broken, my father rushed to the scene immediately. He put the crown prince under house arrest and punished the palace servants involved. He seemed to treat me as if I were his most beloved son. Because of this, rumors began circulating in the palace that Emperor Yu wanted to depose the crown prince and establish a new heir. Suddenly, while I was recuperating from my broken leg, many young men from noble families came to visit me. During this half-month, Su ManMan visited me quite often. She would cautiously sneak glances at me, her eyes filled with endless affection. She seemed to really like wearing lotus-pink clothes, with pearl hairpins that gently swayed as she moved. Quiet as a beauty, lively as a rabbit. Even my mother couldn't help but tease us with a pale smile. My fame was even greater than before my leg was broken. But all of this made me think of one word: flattery. My father, His Majesty, has never been a loving or sentimental person. To ascend the throne, he slaughtered most of his siblings. Such a person, whose eyes only see power and profit, I do not believe he truly appreciates or loves me. Under this sudden attention, there must be ulterior motives. Sure enough, my leg had been broken for less than a month when my mother suddenly fell ill, and before we could summon the imperial physician, she had already passed away. Everything happened so quickly that I didn't have time to react. Before my father spoke, there were already voices in the court saying I had cursed my mother to death. The prophecy of the heterochromatic-eyed person being a national omen of misfortune resurfaced. Everyone seemed to suddenly regain their memory. My heterochromatic eyes, which they could see all the time, suddenly caused them endless panic. On my 14th birthday, I lost my mother forever, and from then on, I was alone. I requested to go to the northern tribes before my father could pass judgment on me. On the day the imperial edict was issued, I took my mother's relics and set off with my leg still not fully healed. I knew that staying here wouldn't kill me, but I would only live like a dog. But if I voluntarily went to the northern tribes, everything would be different. In recent years, our dynasty has been relatively peaceful. Emperor Yu is skilled in strategy and power but also knows how to be a wise ruler. After several years of light taxes and duties, the Central Plains have been peaceful and prosperous. Except for the northern tribes, the northern minorities have been invading year after year. The northern tribes are nomadic people, riding horses and wrestling all day, brave and fierce in battle. In recent years, the temperature in the north has been constantly dropping, and harsh natural conditions have forced the northern tribes Khan to expand southward, becoming the greatest threat to the Tang family's empire. My father, by nature suspicious, began weakening the power of military generals as soon as he ascended the throne. Now, it has formed a situation of strong civil, weak military. The status of military generals has been constantly declining. Those with ability are either marginalized or unable to bear the humiliation, choosing to retire to the countryside. When a crisis truly arises, there is no one to use. As the ninth prince of the current dynasty, although I have no real power, my recent fame has been quite prominent, giving me some reputation. This trip to the northern tribes, firstly, shows the importance the authorities place on it, stabilizing the military's morale and the hearts of the border people. Secondly, with me gone, the Su family wanting to produce an empress to achieve the ideal of foreign relatives interfering in politics becomes a pipe dream. My departure to the northern tribes, with an unknown return date, makes my engagement to Su ManMan difficult to dissolve because I am going to war for the country. As long as I live well at the border, even if hanging by a thread, Emperor Yu's purpose is achieved. The carriage swayed out of the imperial city. At this moment, I felt incredibly relaxed. Since my birth, this was the most leisurely and relieved I had ever been. I didn't have to be caught up in the struggle for power, didn't have to be needlessly harassed by those princes. The road ahead was long, filled with the unknown and hope. Emperor Yu didn't want me to die, so he bestowed upon me many excellent healing medicines and wound ointments, as well as a personal military physician to accompany me. It was clear that, compared to before, he truly didn't want me to die this time. So, months later, when we reached the Northern Territory, my injured leg was almost healed. During these months, Su ManMan sent me a few letters. But from these letters, I couldn't discern much sincerity. Growing up by my mother's side, who was not favored, I had long learned to see through people's hearts. I understood from our first meeting that she had it all calculated. It was just that I was too caught up at the time, briefly indulging in a gentle dream. But I don't really hate her, nor do I dislike her. There are too many foolish people in this world. Su ManMan is greedy, but to navigate among several princes with ease was unexpected. In Su ManMan's heart, there was apparent worry and concern for me, yet it was laced with disdain. The Su family, constrained by the emperor's authority, dared not propose breaking off the engagement. They hoped I would bring it up myself. I didn't pay much attention to Su ManMan's letters. I had more important things to do: stabilizing public sentiment, consolidating the frontier defenses, revitalizing the army, and quickly getting into combat readiness. There was still much for me to accomplish. On the third day after I arrived at the northern border, the northern tribe's army attacked again. Fortunately, our army was prepared, but the time was too rushed, and the preparations were insufficient, so the battle was evenly matched. The casualties were severe. I stood on the city wall, looking at the bodies of soldiers from both sides lying outside the city. Severed limbs were everywhere, and the blood had turned the yellow earth a dark red. I let out a breath of turbid air. No matter when, the ones most deeply hurt by war are always the common people. In times of war, the bodies of soldiers who died on the battlefield were left uncollected. The northern tribe's army retreated under the cover of night, camping 20 miles away, north of the northern desert river. I led 100 soldiers to a place 5 or 6 miles outside the city, dug a large pit, and buried the fallen soldiers, regardless of friend or foe. I knew that the battle with the Northern Tribes' army would be a fierce one. So, I refused the soldiers' decision to prepare the largest tent for me and ate and slept with the ordinary soldiers. I also trained with the soldiers regularly. Initially, the soldiers were not very convinced by such a young commander like me. Among them, Deputy Commander Zhang Fuguei was especially so. Deputy Commander Zhang was over 30, at the prime of his life, full of vigor. He was one of the few capable military commanders left in our dynasty. Before I arrived, Zhang Fuguei was the commander. He had served in the army for over 10 years, finally getting such an opportunity to serve the country, only to be overshadowed by a young upstart like me. If I were him, I wouldn't be convinced either. After all, even Emperor Yu himself only became a deputy commander at 17. In history, there was only one person who could become a commander at 14, and that was the founding emperor of our Tang dynasty. And now, Emperor Yu had given me the commander's position right away. This was completely putting me on the spot. I joined the soldiers every day, getting up at dawn for training. After sunrise, we had breakfast together. Occasionally, I organized the soldiers to help the common people with some physical labor. After some time, although Zhang Fuguei was still not convinced by me, at least we could get along normally. So, I carried forward the traditional virtue of shameless persistence, passed down by our ancestors. Every few days, I would go to town to buy a couple of jars of wine. Upon returning, I would take the wine jars and head straight to Zhang Fuguei's tent. Zhang Fuguei looked down on me as a connected person, but he appreciated the wine in my hands. Although he was a deputy commander, the military pay for our Tang dynasty's generals was low. Zhang Fuguei had an elderly mother, wife, and children at home, a large family waiting for him to send money back each month. So this middle-aged man lived frugally, only drinking once or twice a month. This wine was my tuition. As the saying goes, you can't refuse someone who offers you something. Zhang Fuguei drank my wine, so naturally, he had to carefully guide me through my training difficulties. Your spear technique is using the wrong force. Zhang Fuguei took the long spear from my hand, and with a thrust and a strike, it was like a forceful bamboo splitting, a sense of pressure accompanied by the sound of breaking wind coming at me. But before I had time to dodge, Zhang Fuguei stopped his action just inches from me. The sharp spearhead was right at my nose. Your left hand is too close to the spearhead, and your right hand is too far away. You can't exert any force. You're relying entirely on brute force. Zhang Fuguei finished speaking and let me carefully observe his movements. Zhang Fuguei's teaching was always meticulous. Unlike his rugged appearance with a full beard, he was rough on the outside but meticulous on the inside. I have to say, he was a good teacher and a good general. When I set out, it was the scorching summer, accompanied by the noisy cicadas. When I arrived at the northern border, it was just the golden autumn. But now, in the blink of an eye, it was already the cold winter, and this year's winter seemed particularly cold. In the deep winter of the 12th lunar month, even in the central plains, people needed to wrap themselves in layers of clothing and wear heavy cloaks. Not to mention the weather in the north, where everything in sight was white. The soldiers, however, did not have enough clothing and provisions to keep warm, and many soldiers had frostbite on their hands and feet, itching unbearably, and when scratched, the skin broke and bled. These days, the northern desert river had frozen over with a thick layer of ice. I knew that the northern tribe's army's provisions were also running low, and they were ready to move. I had already sent a letter to the court, an urgent message delivered over 800 miles. Our army urgently needed military pay and provisions. I know that no matter how Emperor Yu treats me, he would never joke about his kingdom or his people. Therefore, the military funds are sure to arrive. I'm just afraid the soldiers can't wait any longer. On the 23rd day of the 12th lunar month, I used what little savings I had left to buy a cart of wine. There wasn't much wine, and there were many soldiers, so we could only sit around the fire, each taking a sip and passing it along. Wine can warm the body and lift the spirits. That day, a large group of us gathered together, and celebrated our first small new year on the frontier. I knew that besides me, all the soldiers wanted to go home. But the return date was unknown, maybe soon, maybe in a few years. Perhaps some might never return to their hometowns. Maybe the fire was burning too brightly, as the soldiers' eyes were all red. Even Deputy General Zhang was. The supplies hadn't arrived yet, and Zhang Fugui unexpectedly met with an accident. The soldiers were truly cold and hungry, unable to bear it any longer. Zhang Fugui took advantage of the deep night to lead a small team to raid the northern tribe's supply camp. Originally, a surprise attack on the enemy could have been a good thing. But it was as if the northern tribe's army knew our every move. When Zhang Fugui lifted the tent flap of the northern tribe's supply camp, what greeted him wasn't supplies, but fierce northern tribe soldiers. Deputy General Zhang sacrificed himself. In fact, from the moment he was captured, he only had two paths before him: surrender or die. I sent envoys to negotiate desperately, but still couldn't change this outcome. The northern tribe's great general knew that the main force of our army wasn't me, this young marshal, but the experienced Zhang Fugui. After Zhang Fugui's death, our army was quite dispirited for a while. Even though the supplies had arrived, and the soldiers no longer needed to endure hunger and cold. I took the silver coins allocated to me by Emperor Yu, left the camp, went to the town and bought 2 jars of wine. This time, I no longer had someone to consult. That Deputy General Zhang, who would crave the aroma of wine while pretending to sternly correct my moves, was gone. Just the night before, Zhang Fugui had cheerfully told me that his eldest son was preparing to get engaged, and he wanted to earn some merits to bring back for his future grandchild to play with. This was my second time experiencing the pain of parting, and it was hard to bear. I opened the 2 jars of wine and drank them all in one go. Then I collapsed unconscious. At the end of the year and the beginning of the new one, our army lured the northern tribe's army to Black Mountain, using the terrain to encircle them, and won my first battle victory. The following spring, the northern tribe's king passed away, and the northern tribe's army changed its chief commander 3 times. In early summer, by the northern desert river, our army achieved the greatest victory since the beginning of the conflict. 3 years later, our army had wiped out nearly 60% of the northern tribe's army. To continuously replenish their fighting force, the northern tribes emptied their national treasury, and almost all able-bodied men joined the war. Thus, the 2 sides dragged on for another 2 years. In the late autumn of the 5th year, the 2 armies faced a decisive battle. "Ha ha ha," I said among the princes. "Junimo is the most like me back in the day. Your Majesty is wise." On the day I returned to the capital, Emperor Yu held a grand celebration banquet for me. I requested rewards for all the soldiers, and for the fallen ones, Emperor Yu posthumously honored them and took care of their families. Still, I must say he is a good ruler, but not necessarily a good father and certainly not a good husband. I was used to drinking and eating meat with the soldiers, but found it hard to handle the socializing at the court. So after a few rounds of drinks, I couldn't resist any longer and excused myself to sober up outside the banquet hall. Once in the imperial garden, the strong fragrance of osmanthus slightly dispelled my unease. But there was a gaze that was hard to ignore. Junimo. My engagement with Su ManMan was annulled 3 years ago, just before she came of age. If it weren't for my mother's illness back then, I wouldn't have pretended to have feelings for Su ManMan. I couldn't stand Su ManMan's cunning and her father's opportunism. So 3 years ago, I used the battle at the northern desert river as leverage to force my father to annul the engagement with Su ManMan. Su ManMan had been indoctrinated daily by her father to become the most honored woman in the world by sitting on the empress's throne. She was immersed in the struggles of the inner palace. Though she had grown into a graceful and talented woman, the competition among the princes had long made her hold her head high. Yet, she was foolish and greedy for wealth, but she never truly harmed me. So, I couldn't really ruin her reputation or delay her marriage. It just so happened that Crown Prince Tang Hiyu couldn't resist the pleas of the court and had already married a crown princess. With the Su family's power and status, Su ManMan couldn't be a concubine, even if it was to the noble crown prince. So, after a long standoff, my father finally agreed to annul the engagement. Now, I consider myself to have given Su ManMan freedom, and she has married the fifth prince, born of noble consort Shui, as a princess. The fifth prince is also considered a hot contender for the throne, besides Crown Prince Tang Hiyu. I really couldn't understand why she was acting this way when she saw me. Please compose yourself, sister-in-law. I slightly bowed my head. Looking at the person before me, her eyes were already red. I really didn't understand, nor did I want to. I have requested my father to grant me the title in the South River region, and I will be departing soon. The South River area is filled with merchants who hold a low status in society. Since the previous dynasty, the descendants of merchants have been prohibited from participating in civil service exams, unable to enjoy equal legal status, and even the colors and fabrics of their clothing are strictly regulated. My voluntary request to become a prince in the South River is akin to being exiled in the court. For a time, the entire capital, including the imperial court and the harem, was slightly stirred by this news. I am the ninth prince who has just returned victorious, a young marshal capable of leading 100 men. Many noble families secretly wish to marry off their daughters to me, even forgetting my heterochromatic eyes. Once again, I lament the forgetfulness of people. I also understand the coldness of the world, where everyone only thinks for themselves, finding excuses and pretexts for all unpleasant things, as if this would allow them to live peacefully. Therefore, my heterochromatic eyes are like a curse. You never know when they will act up, maybe tomorrow or maybe never. The South River region is warm, and the people are gentle. When I first arrived in the South River, I did not reveal my identity. My heterochromatic eyes were blatantly exposed, and I had no servants with me. For a moment, I was surrounded as if I were a rare species. I laughed at myself. My experiences from childhood made me develop a tendency for self-abuse. I deliberately exposed my heterochromatic eyes, listening to others pointing and laughing, mocking their ignorance. But isn't such behavior of mine also ridiculous and pathetic? A woman's voice rang out, and the surrounding people trembled and dispersed. I turned to look at the owner of the voice, a woman dressed in gray coarse linen, yet her attire was not shabby. Her eyes were sharp and spirited. Her eyebrows not the delicate and gentle type of most women, but exuded a heroic spirit. Her entire demeanor was unlike that of an ordinary person. "Hey, you look quite handsome, and your eyes are a treasure that sets you apart from the world." She walked up to me, patted my sleeve, seemingly in comfort. Then she turned to leave. "Hey, miss." I instinctively wanted to stop her but lacked a reason. The woman turned to look at me, and after a few seconds of stalemate, I never expected the one to break the impasse would be my stomach. It growled. After a long journey, I had no appetite, and just as I shook off my servants to take a walk, my stomach, which had never embarrassed me in 20 years, failed me today. I lowered my head, feeling a bit embarrassed. After spending 5 years with the generals, I had never been so embarrassed. "Hey, come on. I'll treat you to some noodles." The woman walked ahead, then suddenly stopped. "By the way, I haven't asked how to address you. You can call me Nine." Revealing my real name would expose my identity, and since I am the ninth among the princes, this way of addressing me is not wrong. "All right, Nine, I'm Li Xiaoran." "Hey, aren't you curious about my real name?" Couldn't help but be curious. A name is just a label. I can't just call you Hey, right? Besides, if you want to tell me, you will naturally say it. If not, it's no big deal. I admired the woman in front of me. She was more carefree and transparent than most people. As I expected, Li Xiaoran is a merchant. Her demeanor is extraordinary, clearly not from an ordinary family. However, her attire did not match her overall temperament. Gray and coarse fabric, which are the strict clothing requirements imposed on merchants by the court. Li Xiaoran also learned my identity from the servants who came looking for me later. Although I am now a leisurely prince without real power, I still have some connections and influence, while Li Xiaoran has been in business for many years, with industries spanning inns, tea houses, clothing shops, and cosmetic stores. Currently, she has money but no status. I have some reputation but not enough money. We are a perfect match. So our next goal is to infiltrate our business into the capital. I picked up where Li Xiaoran left off. Indeed, I may have been exiled to the South River, but I still have to find a way to return to the capital. Although Li Xiaoran's business ventures are extensive and successful, they are limited to the South River region. Our goals align once again. The capital is a critical area with particularly strict commercial regulations. Without influence, it is impossible to lease a shop for business. But I have that capability. My maternal grandfather, the former Prime Minister Lin Fenghua, served as a tutor for many years before becoming Prime Minister, and many young nobles in the capital studied alongside princes and heirs. After becoming Prime Minister, my grandfather also took in disciples, with students spread across half the court. After my triumphant return from the Northern Campaign, I quickly contacted my grandfather's former students and subordinates. Most of them took a wait-and-see approach, but some, either out of gratitude to my grandfather or optimism about me, offered support. As a result, I am now considered one of the top connected princes. By leveraging these connections, in the second month after leaving the capital, Li Xiaoran and I, as co-owners, opened an inn right under the imperial city, on the most bustling Golden Street. Li Xiaoran sent her 2 best chefs to the capital. These chefs could prepare specialty dishes from all over the country. Combined with Li Xiaoran's top-notch management and business strategies, the 1,000 flavors in quickly became a sensation in the capital. Under my suggestion, the establishment of the Gentleman's Terrace and the Poetry Pavilion attracted a large number of scholars and disciples. Taverns have always been able to convey a lot of information and offer more opportunities to connect with officials. Due to the booming business of the 1,000 Flavors Inn, Li Xiaoran and I planned to open a branch. In no time, there were 5 Flavor Inn in the entire capital. Gradually radiating from the capital to surrounding cities, within 3 years, every state and province in the Tang dynasty had a branch of Flavor Inn. Li Xiaoran and I also actively expanded other businesses. Industries such as tea houses and cosmetic shops began to emerge in the capital. Through these industries centered around Flavor Inn, we formed a network of connections in the capital and nationwide. The business affairs were publicly managed by Li Xiaoran, so the entire royal family has not yet noticed my actions. At this moment, the 5th prince staged a coup. In recent years, the power of Shui concubine's maternal family was repeatedly weakened by Emperor Yu. Officials of the 5th prince's faction were also repeatedly suppressed and demoted. Seeing this trend, the 5th prince feared he would never attain the throne. He actually joined forces with the Prime Minister Su, who had been ground underfoot by Emperor Yu for years, to stage a coup. However, Emperor Yu had trained a group of highly skilled secret guards. As soon as the 5th prince Tang Hezhou's sword was placed on Emperor Yu's neck, the secret guards immediately subdued him with a reverse hold. At the critical moment, the Prime Minister Su distanced himself completely. He had many daughters, though only one legitimate daughter. But if Su ManMan really lost her value, he could let another daughter take her place. Tang Hezhou's coup failed, implicating many officials. The first to be affected was the Shui family branch. The emperor's wrath left countless corpses. After this event, it was said that the bloody smell in the capital took half a month to dissipate. Emperor Yu, being old, still remembered some father-son affection with Tang Hezhou. So he and Su ManMan were only placed under house arrest in the old palace where concubine Shui once lived, heavily guarded by Emperor Yu's troops. Li Xiaoran poured me a cup of tea made from newly acquired leaves. This tea costs 500 gold per ounce. Try it and see what's different. I took a sip. It was sweet and refreshing. Indeed, it was good, lifting my spirits. Being far from the court, Emperor Yu couldn't see me, allowing me to stay clean from the sensitive topic of succession that has been debated for centuries. After the 5th prince fell, Emperor Yu seemed to be so angered by his own son threatening him that he became bedridden. The crown prince Tang Hiyu, after waiting for so many years, finally had the chance to govern. 2 years later, Emperor Yu became paralyzed in bed, a breathing invalid. At this time, Tang Hiyu did something outrageous. He ordered people to break into concubine Shui's Crescent Moon Palace and forcibly took the 5th prince's wife, Su ManMan. Upon receiving the secret message from the capital, I chuckled softly. Seems among the royal offspring, Tang Hiyu is indeed the most infatuated. 10 years have passed, and Tang Hiyu, now in his 30s, still can't forget his former moonlight. Su ManMan immediately abandoned her years of marital affection for Tang Hezhou and spent a sweet yet absurd time with Tang Hiyu. It's said that upon hearing this, Emperor Yu was so angered he regained his ability to speak. Clearly, this was unexpected for Tang Hiyu. He didn't foresee his father, who was on the brink of passing, being angered to sit up in shock from his deathbed. Although bedridden, Emperor Yu's secret guards remained loyal. Compared to Emperor Yu, Tang Hiyu was like an arm wrestling a leg. After a few years of governance, his foundation was still unstable. But by this time, most of the princes had fallen in the struggle for the throne, leaving only those either too young or incompetent. My dear father remembered me at this time, a son he abandoned, used, and repeatedly discarded due to my natural heterochromia. Emperor Yu secretly summoned me back to the capital 5 days later. Li Xiaoran and I dawdled our way to the capital, and Emperor Yu was left with only his last breath. He wanted to pass the throne to me. Did my mother's death have anything to do with you? I lowered my eyes, staring directly at Emperor Yu lying on the bed. Yes, Emperor Yu still couldn't lie. Having received the answer I wanted, I turned to leave the chamber. Junimo, the throne I want. No need. I didn't look back. A few days later, Emperor Yu was critically ill. A spy reported that he left a decree to pass the throne, but it was secretly destroyed by Tang Hiyu. My father, Emperor Yu, who ruled the Tang dynasty for over 30 years, passed away. I didn't kill him myself, although he indirectly caused my mother's death. But he was a wise ruler. He knew how to appoint capable people, understood the importance of light taxation, cared for the people, and accepted advice. I stayed in the capital until my father's death, witnessing his passing. As for the throne he wanted to pass to me, I didn't want to inherit it. What a joke! I've been deploying for so many years, swallowing my pride, building connections, fighting on the battlefield. Isn't it all for seizing the throne? After my father's death, Tang Hiyu couldn't wait to ascend the throne. However, Tang Hiyu's act of forcibly taking Su ManMan rekindled the Empress dream for Su ManMan and the Prime Minister Su. But Tang Hiyu seemed to have come to his senses. He made the former crown princess his empress. And Su ManMan, from being the unattainable white moonlight, turned into the tasteless, yet hard to discard sticky rice. She only received the rank of noble lady, not much higher than an ordinary palace maid. After Tang Hiyu ascended the throne, I let him enjoy 10 days of carefree life, indulging in the thrill of being an emperor. Then, under the guise of mourning, I did the same thing that the 5th prince, Tang Hezhou, once attempted, forcing a palace coup. However, the only difference was that the 5th prince failed and I succeeded. Although I had no military power, General Chen, who held the military power, was my old comrade from my expedition days. Tang Hiyu was caught off guard by my actions. His 10 days as emperor seemed like a dream. Tang Hiyu was pinned to the ground by my sword, unable to move. At this moment, the late emperor's close eunuch, Eunuch Su, presented the true edict of succession. My claim to the throne was thus legitimized. Tang Hiyu was executed on the spot under the charge of plotting to harm the late emperor. At this moment, Su ManMan, dressed in plain white, burst in, shouting, "Let me in!" Once inside, she didn't even glance at Tang Hiyu's corpse, but instead looked at me with reddened eyes. "Junimo, all these years, I've been waiting for you. Look at the clothes I'm wearing now. These are the ones I wore when we first met." "Junimo, I know, we are in love with each other. I frowned, wondering what on earth she was talking about. I knew the words individually, but together they made no sense to me. Hold on. Hold on. Who are you? I couldn't help but interrupt her. Are you the crown prince's wife? Or the fifth prince's wife? Su ManMan's face turned pale in an instant, as if all life had drained from her, and she sat on the ground, staring at me blankly. Junimo, back then, it was you and I who were engaged. I didn't know that the engagement she once considered insignificant would now be brought up as the sole bond between us. Yes, you're right, we do have a bond. So, I exiled her and the entire Su family to the northern frontier. So, you can guard the place that witnesses our bond with the northern tribes. After ascending the throne, I continued Emperor Yu's enlightened policies. At the same time, I lifted restrictions on commerce, allowing other countries to trade with our dynasty. I abolished all the unequal policies against merchants that had persisted for centuries. Li Xiaoran suddenly became the richest person in the Tang dynasty. When she came to discuss the profits from the shops and taverns with me, I was being tormented by the ministers urging me to choose a consort and establish an empress. Can this money be used as a bride price? As soon as I said this, Li Xiaoran's hands, which were quickly moving the abacus beads, paused. I won't marry unless I'm the empress, Li Xiaoran said with a smile, her eyes bending into crescents. Am I getting a good deal? A bowl of noodles in exchange for such a handsome husband? Extra story. My ambition was never the throne. As someone with heterochromia, I only wanted to preserve myself and my mother within the confines of the palace. When my father first noticed me, despite my resentment towards his suppression of my maternal family and his years of neglect towards me and my mother, I was still delighted that he finally started to pay attention to me and showed concern for my mother. Even the slightest bit of attention that slipped through his fingers, I cherished greatly. But I soon realized I was just a pawn to him, insignificant. From the moment I was born, he used me as a pawn to checkmate my maternal family. Now, he wanted to use me to suppress Prime Minister Su's power. Prime Minister Su's ambition was an open secret in the court. So, I had no objection to being used against Prime Minister Su. However, my father should never have used my mother's death to scheme against me, to humiliate Prime Minister Su. After my mother's death, I would most likely be thrown into the cold palace to fend for myself. They wouldn't let me die, to showcase my father's mercy. They would let me live a life worse than death, repeatedly degrading Prime Minister Su. For this reason, I directly requested to go to the northern tribes. The northern tribes was perilous, with constant warfare, and the court was filled with civil officials, with no one capable of fighting a war. I was determined that my father wouldn't refuse my request to lead the army to the northern tribes. During those days, I never saw Su ManMan again. Perhaps Prime Minister Su didn't allow it, or perhaps she herself avoided me. I always disliked, or rather looked down on Su ManMan. She was always thinking of climbing higher, navigating between the various princes. During those 5 years in the northern tribes, I grew a lot. It was something I couldn't learn in the palace. I personally experienced the hardships of life for the people at the border. I learned many strategies for warfare. These strategies and tactics could not only be used in battle but also in the struggle for the throne. That's right, I now plan to play the role of an emperor for a while. My father schemed against me. Tang Hiyu humiliated me, all of which I could endure. But after my mother's death, I realized that enduring only allowed my father to continuously exploit my value. After all, I wasn't his favored heir to the throne. I knew he somewhat believed in the heterochromia superstition, but mostly he wanted to suppress the power of the ministers to strengthen the imperial power. I couldn't sit idly by and wait for death. I had to take the initiative. So, after returning victorious from the northern tribes, I proactively requested to South River. I didn't need any other rewards, just this one request. My father pondered for a moment and agreed. I saw Su ManMan again. After so many years, she was even more delicate than before, like a graceful white lotus, attracting the attention of both the crown prince and the fifth prince. She must have started to see some value in me again, so she wanted to talk to me. What a joke, I don't like tea. I arrived in the South River region. Here, peddlers and vendors shout and sell, full of the bustling life of the common folk. Because there are many merchants, the taxes in the South River region are harsh. This is something my father continued from the previous dynasty, and it's the part of his political strategy one am most dissatisfied with. While commerce certainly increases population mobility, invigorates the thoughts of the people, and allows them to trade with other countries and be influenced by foreign ideas, it also makes it more challenging for rulers to manage the populace. However, in the long run, the development of the country needs the support of commerce, and population mobility will also promote fiscal growth. I shook off the servant and wandered the streets alone. In places far from the capital, the air is indeed fresher, no matter where you go. I exposed my different colored eyes, and for some reason, I even held my head high to show them more clearly to the people. As expected, they attracted attention. No one spoke out of turn, but everyone looked at me as if I were an oddity. Look, I am such an oddity. I mocked myself in my heart. Disperse, disperse. You're all full and have nothing better to do than stare at someone's eyes. Suddenly, a woman's voice rang out, and the crowd scattered. She approached me again, carefully examining my eyes. Your eyes are the treasure that sets you apart from the world, she said to me word by word. It was the first time someone had said that to me. Are my different colored eyes a treasure? She came and went in a hurry, but I didn't want my interaction with her to be so fleeting, so I called out to her. After executing Tang Hiyu on the spot, I saw Su ManMan again. Although I hadn't seen her over the years, I hadn't missed her scandalous affairs with Tang Hiyu. Unexpectedly, after she came in, she didn't even glance at Tang Hiyu but came straight to me. She actually said that we had a deep bond and that our fate was destined. Where did she get the nerve? In the past, she looked down on me, acting like a cold and distant moonlight. Now that Tang Hezhou and Tang Hiyu have fallen, she's remembered me? I'm beyond annoyed. Over the years, Su ManMan has put in a lot of effort. She looked down on me yet didn't want to let go of this connection. She wanted to make me one of the princes who adored her. Originally, after Tang Hiyu's death, I was quite at ease in this palace. But who would have thought that Su ManMan, though not harmful, could be so irritating? To eliminate future troubles, I directly exiled the entire Su family to the northern tribes. Since Su ManMan and I are so fated, let her go to the northern tribes' border and deepen this bond with me. I finally married Li Xiaoran. For 5 years, I imagined more than once being able to marry Li Xiaoran. I only reigned for 5 years. During that time, the ministers constantly urged me to choose concubines and expand the harem to ensure heirs. But I refused them all, citing the need to focus more on state affairs as I had just ascended the throne. For 5 years, I continued the former emperor's political ideals, recruited talents, and promoted open-mindedness. I encouraged the people to invent and create, applying these in agriculture, commerce, and various fields. We traded with neighboring countries, whether desert or ocean, and Xiaoran and I devised suitable transportation methods. Unified writing, standardized vehicles, and harmonious conduct. The entire country appeared to be in a state of political harmony and flourishing. In these 5 years, I also intentionally nurtured the young son of the former emperor, my 16th brother, who was spared in the past struggle for the throne. Now, my 16th brother is already dignified and courteous. So one day I asked Xiaoran, "Do you want to go back to the South River region and take a look?" "Of course I do. Being an empress isn't comfortable. I still want to be that carefree innkeeper." "Let's go. I'll take you to escape from the palace." I took Xiaoran's hand and boldly left the capital. No one dared to stop us. No wonder so many people want to be emperor. "Hey, aren't you going to be emperor anymore?" Xiaoran and I drank wine and counted money at the Flavors Inn, having a great time. Who cares? I also think being emperor is boring. Counting money with Xiaoran is the most fun. I left a decree of abdication in the palace. As for the rest, what does it have to do with me, a commoner?